Our developmental computation model is predicting no meaningful input differences across SES when it comes to learning this set of syntactic island knowledge from this part of the input. And what's useful, again, about the learning theory in this case that was implemented in that model is that it specifies how the input is predicted to cause that knowledge to develop by paying attention to these certain building blocks. And so because of that, we know which building blocks are particularly important for success. We can zoom in and look at that. So the key building blocks involve complementizer that, CP that here. At least, some of them, right? There are many, but at least some of them involve CP that, because two of the islands, our whether and our adjunct islands, only differ from grammatical dependencies by the complementizer that's used. So just to illustrate this, we have what does the teacher think that Lily forgot? That's perfectly fine. Our embedded dependency with a non-island structure with that. And the only difference structurally, really, that we can see between whether and adjunct islands and that is the complementizer used, right? Same general structure. What does the teacher wonder or worry? And, it's something that Lily forgot, and it's whether or if. So you need to sort of care about complementizer that, right, to distinguish whether and adjunct islands from the okay dependency, the more preferable, the more acceptable dependency that crosses complementizer that. And again, we can see this in the building blocks when we look at the WH dependencies, syntactic paths here, right? CP that versus CP whether versus CP if. So these are the dependencies, and so the building blocks are the chunks that involve this phrasal node in this particular case. So children need to encounter grammatical WH dependencies that involve CP that in order to get exposure to that this is an okay building block. And these are actually pretty rare in child-directed speech. Again, our samples, when we looked at them, of course, are much smaller than the amount that children actually get access to, but we found 2 in our lower SES sample and 2 in our higher SES sample, even though it was much bigger, which works out, to these percentages, which are pretty small. You can see some examples of what they are here in each case. But with enough input over several years, remember we were looking at by age 4, even these rare cases are predicted to support learning, so you sort of, again, take the amount that you're going to encounter over the 4-year period and this rate of encountering them from the dependencies, and you still get like 270, you still get like 130. I mean, they're not that often, but there are some, right? And so, and if you sort of think about this in terms of how many per month, 8.5 per month or 3.5 per month, not a lot, but some, more than never, is the idea. And in fact, if the samples are reasonably accurate, again, something that's kind of cool in this sense is that lower SES children actually would see this building block more often, right? Again, if we can trust these, these samples, which that's what we have to work with, right? So that's sort of in some sense a higher quality aspect of that input for learning about these syntactic islands. And what's interesting, I think, in particular, is that the low SES-WH dependency from our samples, these 2 instances of CP that actually came from the same type of dependency spoken by different speakers, which is this one. What do you think that happens? Which is actually judged to be ungrammatical, typically, in the higher SES dialect. It's called a that trace violation. Higher SES speakers tend not to like it. But that seems to be the primary way that lower SES kids, from our sample, are getting exposed to that building block that involves complementizer that. So the upshot is that lower SES children are predicted to achieve the same learning outcome, certainly with respect to whether and adjunct islands, as higher SES children by age 4, by leveraging key building blocks from sources that a higher SES child wouldn't hear, because these sources are ungrammatical for high SES speakers, right? You're getting the same knowledge about the complementizer that, but from different places, right? And that's the knowledge you need to end up with the correct intuitions about whether and adjunct islands. So this is one reason why measurable differences in the input might not be developmentally meaningful, right? So under this learning theory, the building blocks may show up in different places, but they're still present in the input, and presence is what you need, and you don't really necessarily care where they come from.